But let's get this underway so that we can maximize the amount of time we have together. So Jessica, if you want to introduce yourself, let's get this
Absolutely.
going together.
Thanks, Danielle. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So my name is Jessica. I'm one of the therapists here at Chef. So I'm a social worker, and I've been practicing for over, I lost track, I think 12 years now. So I work a lot with individuals who are navigating a lot of stress or demands in their lives. So whether that's being in high demand careers, navigating with parenting, maybe caregiving for your own parents. So I really support individuals in like navigating those stressors, a lot in supporting individuals around burnout as well, and how to kind of overcome it and work through it. And also the kind of like the anxiety that comes with like navigating all these pieces. I know I keep saying navigating, but just the anxiety that we experience, whether that's about our roles as parents within our jobs, whether that's like imposter syndrome, all of those pieces are things that I often support people with. And so, too, I am a mom of two as well. So I'm in those thick of the parenting too, and navigating a job. So I can understand what that's like.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jess. I am just going to, there she is. Lucy's popped up
Yes.
now. We lost her for a second.
Yeah, I saw she left. I was
Lucy,
like, oh, I hope she's back soon.
we're here. We're here. Tech issues pop up all the time. Just bear with us for a second here.
Perfect.
Just popped in. Beautiful. Thanks,
Yes.
Lucy.
So we're going to be talking about decoding burnout. So you're all here to learn about that and why, like Danielle said, why taking a vacation won't solve your problem. And I'm really disappointed by that as well. But we'll talk a little bit more about what we kind of need, kind of working through burnout. Before we do that, let's talk about what's understanding like what stress and burnout is.
Beautiful. Yes. So I think we have
Oh, we
a
have a
first
poll
poll
first.
here. Yeah, no worries. So we just want to do a quick check-in here. So the question is, rate your current stress level. So A1, not stressed at all. B is a 2, C3, D4, or E5, very stressed. So you should see a box pop up on your screen now. Again, with the letters A, B, C, D, E. Just pop in which one you're feeling given your current stress level and then hit submit. We'll just give everyone a few minutes to check in here. Hopefully we're all feeling good today, Tuesday afternoon. And if you are feeling very stressed or moderately, whatever it might be, we will be learning why that might be happening and how we can prevent it. So it's a good space to be regardless of how you're feeling. Beautiful. Okay, so most of us are feeling at a 4 or a C. So moderately, I would say. Jess, would you say the same? Or no,
Yes.
D. I'm
D,
wrong.
yeah.
D. We're all feeling a little bit stressed, and that's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. You've come to the right place to learn. So hopefully by the end of this will change, and we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah, it looks like mostly that C or D, kind of that moderately or more strongly stressed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk about what stress is. So really stress is like it's a normal and natural response to challenging situations. It's a short-term response to demands or pressures that we're experiencing. And it's really characterized by like feelings of tension or anxiety or like irritability or feeling overwhelmed. And so we have stress, but like how does that differ from burnout? And obviously we're talking about burnout today. They're really related concepts, but they have like different experiences and different characteristics. So stress is a response to perceived threats. So it's kind of that immediate that comes up. It's normal and natural when we experience stress. Burnout, in contrast, is caused by prolonged periods of stress and high demands. And then burnout typically happens over time and slowly over time by that prolonged and excessive stress. It's this state of physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion. So, as I mentioned about what burnout is, it's this state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion by excessive and prolonged stress. it's more severe than just experiencing stress as itself. And it's that prolonged over time. And it's typically related to the context of work, but it can be a mix of factors, right? It may not just be work. It may also be caregiving demands, whether that's of, young children or of our own parents. And whether it's from work or the combination, it tends to affect other parts of our lives, right? It affects our relationships with our partners, our family, our friends as well. It affects our ability to be effective in other areas too. It's really characterized by this sense, like having this sense of ineffectiveness or sense of lack of accomplishment within our work, or this cynicism about work, this really negative view about the work that we're doing. And then we also feel really detached from our work. We're not feeling like fulfilled or feeling we're getting much out of it. But we can also experience that detachment in those other parts of our lives. So like I mentioned, we can really see that detachment socially or in our relationships as well. It's really like this exhaustion that happens, and it's being exhausted, just like it says, emotionally, physically, and mentally. So if we think about, one of my colleagues talked about this, about the difference between stress and burnout, and I really liked it. And if we think about stress as almost like it's too much. Stress is that there's too much on our plate. There's too many demands. It feels like there's too much of things. Whereas burnout can feel like it's not enough. It's not enough, right? We have nothing left to give, or the sense of I don't care anymore. So based on kind of these definitions about what we learned about kind of stress as those normal stressors that we come across, and burnout, kind of that prolonged, where we feel that fatigue, that irritability, emotional imbalance, that isolation that we talked about, where we withdraw and we detach. I think we're going to a poll now to look at that. Everyone, you know kind of what those differences are.
Yeah, so given that we now understand a bit more of the difference between stress and burnout, do you think, looking back or currently, you've ever actually experienced burnout when you maybe have thought it's just stress? So Lucy will pull up our poll here in 1 second. So A, for yes, you have experienced burnout. B, no, you haven't experienced burnout. Or C, maybe you're still not sure, and that's okay. We'll give everyone a few seconds here. I truly, before Jessica explained it in this way, in like learning from her, I really wasn't sure of the difference between the two. And they're obviously both like really linked. So I'm excited to learn more from Jessica about, how burnout actually looks, but I never thought to think of them as like completely different aspects. I'm not sure if anyone else agrees with that, but okay, let's see. So almost all of us have experienced burnout at one point in time, if it was before or currently.
Yeah. So a lot of you are really identifying with that sense of like this prolonged stress, and it feels like you have nothing kind of left to give, right? That there's just nothing left there. It's interesting because I know there's been some studies that have been done that really shows that 1 in 4 employees, in a study that was done, they found that 1 in 4 employees were reporting experiencing symptoms of burnout. So it actually like is common, and a lot of people do experience it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about recovery, first I want to talk about, as we said, this is about is why our vacation won't solve our problems. And like I said, I'm disappointed about that too. I hope that we can just go on a vacation and all of this goes away and we feel better. Let's think about it in this way. So I use this analogy. So if anyone's here that's worked with me before, you probably have heard this analogy and I really like it. So if you think about it, like you're a fish in a fish tank, you're swimming around your fish tank, doing your day-to-day lives, right? But what happens when there's prolonged stress over time is like our fish tank gets dirty. It's not getting cleaned. It's not feeling like a nourishing place to be. It doesn't feel refreshing. And it gets like really dirty and really mucky. Right? You think about all those fish tanks you've seen that like the pump stopped working and it wasn't being cleaned up very well. So what happens when we go on vacation is essentially we take ourselves out of that dirty fish tank and we put ourselves into a new fish tank this clean fish tank. Maybe we go to a beach somewhere and it's clean and it's sunny and it's relaxing and we have a margarita or a pina colada, whatever that is. And it feels great and it feels refreshing, right? So we take this vacation, we're in this nice, clean, beautiful fish tank. But what happens when that vacation ends is we go back to the dirty fish tank. So yes, it felt really great. And don't get me wrong, that vacations and time off are important in terms of managing stress. But when it comes to burnout, we're just going right back to the same environment, right? It helps us cope with stress, but it's fleeting. When we come back, we haven't really done anything to address the underlying issues, or those stressors remain unaddressed that are preventing the burnout. And so we need to actually make changes to our fish tank, not just remove ourselves and put ourselves in a new fish tank for a period of time and come back. We actually need to do something about our fish tank. I'm curious, like, what does everyone think about that analogy when we think about how to recover from burnout? If you want to turn on your mic or put in the chat, I'm curious. Yeah, so I'm seeing some people saying agreed and excellent.
Yeah, Suzanne's mentioning that sometimes it takes years, sometimes it's not quick, and Jess, I'm sure you can acknowledge
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, easy to
It's very
understand.
true. So just like it takes time, right? Like I talked about, it's, burnout is this prolonged stress that happens over time, and it's not managing that stress, and it continues and continues. So it's prolonged. And so it happens slowly over time. Recovery from burnout is also slowly over time, right? I think, it can take up to like several years, up to 4 years sometimes, for people to be able to recover from that burnout. So recognizing, like, as it slowly happens, recovery takes time too. So just not a vacation will fix all those things. We actually have to make changes to what we're doing. I see Richard said, that's why I need a vacation from my vacation. I feel that. I actually was just on vacation with 2 young kids, and I came back, I was like, I need a vacation from my vacation because I'm exhausted from that. But it's true. So we got to look at those long-term things. That's what we're talking about. So what are some of those strategies to overcome burnout? And just like you're here today, like, it's really understanding and recognizing the signs, like understanding what burnout is and how it's impacting your life. So when we want to prevent it, we need to know that we need to be able to manage our stress, and we'll talk more about that too. And when we're in it, we also have to know that we're in it, right? And that it's going to take time to recover from that. A lot of people that I've worked with around burnout are always surprised that, like, they just immediately aren't feeling better as they made changes, right? That it does take a while for us to feel more like ourselves, to feel like our authentic selves again, to feel joy and fulfillment in the same way maybe we felt in the past. The other part in that is leaning into our values and setting realistic goals. So a big part is learning about, like, what is most important to you. So some of that work can be done on your own. That can be done if you're working with a therapist, and looking at maybe those values around, like, family, friends, partner, parenting, hobby, spirituality, career, and really looking at, like, what is most important to you, and are you aligning with those, right? And setting realistic goals, so ones that are actually achievable and doable, and aligning more with those values. And when we have a sense of aligning with our values, we kind of feel more fulfillment, right? Because we're doing what is most important to us. A lot of times when we've experienced a lot of stress and we've moved to kind of into that burnout, is we've moved really away from our values about what is most important, right? I hear a lot of, like we talked about, that detachment from relationships, from family, from friends, from our social lives, right? Meanwhile, those things that might be really important to you, or those values, if you have children, like spending time with your kids and actually enjoying, being part of that process and that journey with your kids, but have really moved away from that because of the other demands that are in their life. So looking at what are those realistic goals that can more align with each of those values. The other one around establishing clear and firm boundaries. This is a big one, right? to kind of prevent burnout, we got to be clear, you know, a lot of times you see for some individuals who experience burnout also experience like people pleasing. And so it's really hard to say no. It's really hard to not take on extra work at work. It's really hard to not stretch yourself really thin. And so it's really learning about what it is that you need and prioritizing what you need and being able to say no to things, right? Boundaries can be around saying no to people who are for more projects at work, or people who are asking things of you, but you just don't have the space emotionally or mentally or even time space to do those things. And then one of the hardest part is like setting those firm boundaries, right? We can set them and then reinforce them is really hard. So that also goes back to our values, right? So we want to set boundaries around protecting the things that are most important to us. And I can appreciate that sometimes when we experience burnout, we're in high demand careers, and it can be sometimes hard to set boundaries around working extra or taking on extra work. And then that comes back to our values again, right? Like, is one of your top values right now your career and growth in your career? And if that's one of your values, that may not be what's burning you out, right? But if that's not your value, how do we set boundaries around it? How do we do it in a way that's realistic within the jobs that we have? So it's really starting to think about what are some small ways. For example, some people I've worked with is we've set boundaries just on like ending the workday at a certain time, right? Like once this time happens, not going back on. And recognizing, and that's hard sometimes because we feel like there's expectations that we should. And sometimes it's maybe working through like, are those real expectations, or have we put those expectations on ourselves because of maybe our own insecurities or because of our own imposter syndrome that comes up that feels like we need to prove ourselves. So there may be some deeper work in that area, but what's getting in the way of being able to set those boundaries too. One of the really, really big things with recovering from burnout as well and preventing it is rest and nourishment. So there are 7 different types of rest that we can take, and it's so important. This is the way, nourishment is the way that we move through stress. So we talked about stress kind of being the short-term, like normal experience that we have, but when it's prolonged, that's when we kind of move into burnout. And so we really have to do something about managing the stress that we're experiencing. It's almost think about that we have these stress cycles. So every time we experience stress, we need to move through the cycle. We need to move all the way through that stress. And a lot of times when we've experienced burnout, we haven't been doing that. It's like all the stress just continues to pile, and we have all these uncompleted stress cycles that we're carrying all the time. And so when it comes to prioritizing rest and nourishment, those are the things that help us move through those stress cycles, but also let us kind of like cope with and come down from the stress. So we can break that into 7 different areas. So there's physical, mental, emotional, creative, spiritual, sensory, social. So if we think about them, because you're probably thinking like, what are some of those examples? Maybe I'll throw it out to you. I have tons of ideas. But what do you think some things of nourishment around each of these areas could be that helps us move through our stress, helps us feel positive? What does everyone think could be areas of nourishment within these categories?
Oh, excuse me. I think like I've been actually trying to do a lot of work on this because I think it's really different for like everyone. And I feel like I've been working with some people that are just like, oh, you just need to breathe and you just need to do yoga. I'm like, I find those things don't like, I think really what works for some people doesn't work for everyone. And so I think you really have to kind of do a lot of like almost like reflection on like what makes you feel like joy and like what makes you cup filled. Like that maybe sounds cheesy, but like I really think that like it is really different for everyone.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Definitely, I agree with that. And it's really about finding out what works for you. Because yeah, for some people, meditation works really well and deep breathing works really well. And so for some people, it doesn't help as much. So it's learning about what is really helpful. One of the ways you can kind of figure that out is almost doing like an inventory of like your days, right? You can do an inventory of like writing out the different things that you do and looking at scaling like how depleting versus nourishing is this thing for me, and kind of looking at like how much nourishment I'm getting in your day, but also it helps you to identify, like, oh, okay, these are the things that are nourishing for me, so I want more of these things. I think what's also important to remember too is sometimes we think about like nourishment as self-care and think of self-care for like, oh, I'm going to get my hair done or my nails done. Um, Self-care is so much more than that. Nourishment is so much more than that. Self-care is also setting those boundaries, right? Nourishment are these other ways that we can find too. So I saw lots in the chat of what people are talking about. But like physical can be that like gentle movement. And it's typically what people think of as like sleep, exercise, walks, massage, gentle yoga. It's kind of just those physical ways of getting nourishment and rest. That mental can be meditation, mindfulness, journaling, or even like just thought dumping. I wonder how many people go to their therapy session and just kind of sometimes feel like they just need to get out everything they're thinking, and how helpful that can be at times. If we think about sensory, it's kind of like, what are we consuming? So some of that nourishment and rest is, having media breaks before bed, like not going on our phones or social media. If you're a parent, for sensory, taking a break around your kids. I never realized I got overregulated from sound and noise until I had children. And it gets really loud all the time and really stimulating. So I had to learn that sometimes I need those sensory breaks, and that's okay, right? And that helps me to kind of move through some of my stress and feel rest. It can also be like, if you're living in the city, is reducing your environmental noise. So sometimes it is looking at, how do we change our lighting if we work in a place with fluorescent lights? Do we put music on if there's a lot of cars driving by and environmental noise or construction that's happening around us? So finding those ways to kind of rest our senses as well. In terms of creative, this can be things like going for a walk in nature. These can be actions as well. So like painting or sewing or drawing or carpentry. I know people who like to do carpentry, right? And that's really something that they get nourishment out of and enjoy. Listening to music, making music, right? Where the value is not tied to work. And that's kind of where that creative piece, as long as we're not tying that to the work we're doing. In terms of emotional, is really about being authentic and vulnerable with our thoughts and feelings, and sharing that like with a friend or a partner or a therapist. So sometimes even just sharing what we're experiencing in terms of that burnout, because sometimes it's very easy to feel feelings of like shame or guilt for having burnout, because you feel like, oh, I should be able to get through all this. Other people can do it. Why can't I? So really part of overcoming this is being able to like talk about it. And then that's so important, because connection is actually one of the greatest ways of managing stress, because we co-regulate with other people. So those social pieces are so important in connecting. And it's one of those cures really for burnout, is to co-regulate with other people and have connection with others. But it's also about spending time with people who are supportive and who are positive and who are nourishing, right? And so that's where maybe your boundaries come in again, is if you have some unhealthy relationships that deplete you a lot, it's like, how do we set boundaries with those and have more time with the people that really nourish us and feel good? And then the last one, kind of around spiritual, is it's more about having a connection to something greater than ourselves. So that can be religion, that can be meditation. For some people, it's crystals, right? It could be volunteering. It just feels like something that's more than us. And kind of this, if we think about like all these, there's like this hat trick of kind of moving through our stress, is having an opportunity to have movement, like physical activity, with connecting with others and something greater than ourselves. Can anyone think of examples of something that might be that, like, has all of those three things in one, that can help us move through our stress to prevent burnout or kind of move through burnout? Volunteering, yeah, absolutely. With volunteering, it's something greater than yourself, because you are providing and supporting other people. You sometimes get movement with what you're doing. And then you get connection, whether it's people you're volunteering with, maybe it's animals, maybe it's the other people who are volunteering. Absolutely. Anyone else have any ideas what that could be? Training, participating in a charity walk around, absolutely. Yeah, you're getting the movement, you're doing something more for yourself, you're getting connection with other people who are doing those things, or if you're training in a group, you get that connection. Makes me think of sports teams as well. Like if any of you play sports, like play soccer, basketball, hockey, any of those kind of like team sports, you're getting movement, right? And activity. Something greater than you is like you're part of a team, right? Like you're contributing to a team, and then you're getting connection with your teammates, right? That camaraderie, that team feeling that's all there is another way that really gets all of those pieces in there. And then this last piece around strategies to prevent and overcome burnout, around seeking support, right? Just like we talked about, connection is nourishing. Seeking support, whether that's from like a supportive friend or family member, maybe that's in therapy, right? And talking to someone about burnout, coming up with goals on how to set boundaries or have more of this nourishment in those different areas we talked about, how to get really clear on your values and your goals for yourself too.
All right, thanks for that, Jess. That was so wonderful, all your insight there. So with all that, I know that a lot of us have given some examples in the chat box, but curious to know in our last poll what you are going to incorporate to not reach a point of burnout. So these are just some examples, so feel free to choose one. A would be set firm boundaries. B, doing more things that bring joy. C, communicate your needs more. D, manage your workload. Or E, something else. And you can feel free to share that if you haven't already into the chat box. So you can go ahead and choose. Melissa, I agree, all of them. We can't, in the poll, pick more than two, but do them all if you'd like in the chat box, whatever it might be for you. Also, while we're all still here, Jessica did touch on a piece about seeking support, that it might be through therapy. And this might be for you, might not be for you, or it might be something that you're curious about. So I am going to pop Jessica's online profile into the chat box. So just so you have it, if you want to have a look at how she can better support you, and it might be with burnout or it might be something outside of burnout, Jessica is more than happy to connect with you. She does offer 15 free 15-minute meet and greet, so you can have a chat with her if you'd like to book one, or if you're thinking like I need to get into a session with her and really dive into your goals and concerns. She's more than happy to support you there. So it's just there if you are curious about it, but there's no pressure, of course. All right, let's see what we've all chosen from the poll here. So it looks like the majority of us are just going to do things that bring more joy. And I think that ties into better understanding our values. And that was something that I also really hadn't considered with burnout. I don't know if anyone else has either, how tied your values are to burnout. And if you're ignoring them or depleting them in some sort of way, that's going to lead you down a path here. So doing more things that bring joy, I hear that loud and clear.
I saw in the chat too, asking, can we pick two or all of the above, right? Or connecting more with nature. Yeah. And I saw a question. I know we're going to come to questions, but someone said, maybe we need to do absolutely nothing to recharge.
Yep. Yeah. All right, so we're going to head into a question answer period, and either we'll give you a second to put your questions into the chat box, into that Q&A box rather, if you haven't already. Also, if you want to come off camera and want to come off mute or one or the other, please go ahead. Our handy dandy tech guru, Lucy, will guide this section for us, and we have some time, so hopefully we'll be able to get to everybody. But thank you, everyone, so much. And thanks, Jess. Can we just do a small round of applause for Jessica thus far? Wonderful insight. Thank you so much. And Richard, it looked like you had your hand up there. Did you want to kick us off, or did we maybe not mean to put that reaction? Maybe not. That's okay. Okay, Lucy. Take it away.
Okay, I'm going to take it away. We're going to be able to answer these live on the screen. So I'm just going to pop a question up and then read it to Jess and then see what she thinks. The first one is from Melissa. She said, is there such a thing as short-term burnout, like just a few days, or would that just be considered as stress?
That's a great question. I think that would be more considered a stress because like we talked about, like burnout is like this prolonged experience that we have, that also the recovery is long as well. So we can have stress that builds up over time. I know myself as a parent, like I'll have weeks where I'm just like, I feel so stressed, right? I think it's important to keep in mind too, like burnout isn't like a clinical diagnosis that we can get, right? So I know a lot of times we use those words of like, oh, I feel so burnt out, right? But when we're talking about burnout in its truest form, it's really that like prolonged over time that we're just feeling that mental, physical, emotional exhaustion, that there's just nothing left to give. I think if you are experiencing it over a few days, is really being able to identify like, okay, this is stress. That's naming kind of what we were experiencing. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And then recognizing like, okay, what is it that I need? Right. And it's the same strategies, right? You still want to pull on your coping strategies. And maybe you do need to look at some of more of those like long-term changes to the stressors that exist in our lives to not get to the point of burnout.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have a question from Petra. I'm a sandwich kid, meaning I am a mum of 3 and a caregiver to my mum who has mixed dementia. Plus my circumstances aren't the best and I now have disabilities due to injuries. I feel like everything is thrown on me and I have to micromanage everything, including my supports. And I hate micromanaging. I feel like I need to hire someone to take care of me while I take care of everyone else. Help.
Yeah, that's a lot to take on. I can hear how overwhelming that must be to be parenting 3 kids while caregiving for your own parent while trying to meet your own needs. And really feeling like you said, like you're micromanaging all of these pieces. That's exhausting and that's tough. And I know you said, I feel like I need to hire someone to take care of me while I take care of someone else. And maybe starting to look at like, what supports are there, right? And maybe it's not supports in like the traditional way that we think of as like, oh, relying on family. Maybe it's thinking a little bit outside the box of like, how can you get support for your kids or for your mom, or even getting a break for yourself? Maybe that needs to look a little bit different so you're not having to manage all those things. And I'd be also curious about when you talk about like feeling you hate micromanaging, is there a way to let go? Is that an expectation you're placing on yourself and needing to micromanage? And is there a way to look at how to not have to manage all those things yourself all the time?
Hi, Jessica. I'm Petra.
Hi, Petra.
It may have like a session or something, but it's more than that. It's like, for example, I scheduled my therapy today. I was supposed to actually go and got called in from the school to go deal with the issue with my child. So when I'm trying to make those boundaries or things for me to take care of me, because I have my needs I need to take care of too, and I have supports, meaning that I have caregivers that come in, PSWs that help my mom. I have caregiver relief, meaning that they'll give me an hour or 2 so I can go do what I need to do. But then something happens, or I got to communicate things that I've already communicated, or I have to make sure that things are going properly. Like, I always have to step in, and I'm the only child on top of that too. So I don't have any siblings to say, "Hey, step in, take care of this, so I can go do what I need to do." Like
that's really hard.
Me. So I mean, even I just graduated, and even that was like great accomplishment, tremendous task, because so many things were happening while I was trying to do this. To give you a little more insight too, even last year was really hard for me. I lost 17 people, 17 people that I was very close to, and it's just a lot, like, you know. So
that is a lot. It sounds like you've been trying to manage a lot.
Yeah. So burnt out, I don't even know if there's another word, but I think I'm surpassed that. And I'm doing my best. I'm trying to stay optimistic, but it's just a lot.
That is a lot. It sounds like you have been having to navigate so much, and I can appreciate how that's been so hard. And so I know it's hard. It's easy to say, oh, do this, but it can be more complicated than that and may not feel so easy. So it may be, like you said, and I know you're supposed to have therapy and then the school calls you, and that's hard because it's these unexpected demands that come up all the time. And that's where feeling overwhelmed can come from. But really looking at like, how do you figure out what's going to be good for you and what the things that you're navigating and what you're coming up across. And I think the solution, like we're talking about to burnout, like it's been talked, it's not like a one size fits all, that you just do these things that I'm saying and it'll fix it all. It's about really looking at like, okay, what are you up against? Like, what are your stressors and how do you come up with a plan that's realistic for you and what you're up against? But it sounds like you're in a tough spot right now with having to navigate all of those roles and losses that you've been having.
Yes, definitely. And it's, as you said, the unexpected. That's what it is. It's the unexpected constantly that's going on, and it demands that you don't foresee as being an adult that you have to deal with.
Yeah.
And you put on your girl guide smile and you go out there and you do it. Right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, nobody's checking in on you. Nobody's saying, hey, are you okay? And everybody else looks at you as the strong pillar of the community. Of dealing with things, and they forget that even though you're strong, you still are human, and just showing that compassion, care, and saying, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And I'm a person, I do speak up. I will say, listen, I need this, but it's, even though I say that, I don't always get what I need, right? So it's just navigating through that, and like it, again, a lot.
It is a lot. And, I really appreciate your openness and vulnerability and sharing what that, what it looks like for you and what you've been up against. And I heard too, kind of when you were talking about, communicating and continuing need to communicate. And that's hard too. And that can feel really frustrating. It's a big part though of, reinforcing the things that we're saying is doing the hard work of continuing to ask for what we need and continuing to set boundaries. And that can feel exhausting in itself, but it's a big part of it too, is to continue to show up and continue to do those things. Thank you for sharing.
Because you got to be strong for everybody else, right? So it's hard at that. And like I said, I keep on putting on this mask and going out there, and I did find delight during the day. I do volunteer. I came in tomorrow. I'm going to it because I dealt with the issue with my little one today, who's only 5. The teacher saw how well I do with the class, so she asked me if I wouldn't mind coming in. There's a speech pathologist coming in tomorrow. She's like, would you mind? I would love it if you could come in and maybe help out. And I was like, yeah, no problem. I'll do it. Like, because I want to be there. My son was like, stay, Mom. And I was like, no, I got things I got to do today. Like, I had to give him the hard no. I have things I got to do. I still need to go to my doctor, go to therapy. I got to do, and he's like, okay. It's just, again, just going through that cycle of showing up all the time. And when you have, like, no one showing up for you. And I find that kind of, it's difficult, as you said. I mean, you put in a lot of good stuff out there. Volunteering, I do constantly. Sports, whatever. I was very athletic. Now I'm trying to get back into that because I had sustained injury and have disabilities because of that. So trying to get back into the things I used to do because I was very active. I love sports. I love helping the community, doing stuff. I even started a garden for my community. So
you're doing a lot of those things. I noticed in the comments, Debbie talked about, sometimes we can't change our circumstances, right? And, I've been talking a lot about looking like at our stresses and are there things that can change? And they talked about, maybe it's about how we better manage, considering they talked about acceptance and commitment therapy. And that might be something absolutely to explore about, our circumstances that we're coming across and how to kind of be where we're at right now and have compassion for ourselves and kind of move through the struggles that we have when maybe there's things in our circumstances that we don't have control over. And it may be also looking at, okay, what do you and don't you have control over, and the things that you do we make change to, and how do we cope with the things that we don't have control over right now, and how do we work through that? Absolutely. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Jess. I'm just going to move things along here just so we can get to some of the other questions and continue on with our Q&A, so that we can give some value to others in the group as well. One of the ones that really stuck out to me was this question here. It's an anonymous question, but thank you to whoever did share it. Do you have any recommendations for returning to work after a burnout break? I'm a little afraid to go back.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've worked with a lot of people who've taken leaves of absences due to burnout and then are returning to work. And I think it's really about getting kind of like a good plan in place for yourself about how you're going to continue, how you're going to set boundaries, how you're going to find time for your nourishment, and how you're going to manage those things. And so I think there's a big piece too on working through if there's feelings of anxiety that's coming up or some unhelpful thoughts that are coming up about returning to work. It's just really trying to manage some of those and looking at, okay, what's different now as you're returning versus when you went off of work, and what changes have you made that's going to help you to return to work, right? And so trying not to get into that like catastrophizing spiral that we're going to be right back to where we were. Is kind of recognizing like, okay, here's the things that I have in place, right? Here's the things that I'm doing different, and here's the things I'm going to continue to do to manage the stress that's coming in. I think even just by attending this today and getting a better understanding is like we can better pinpoint when we're starting to have like that more buildup of stress and starting to get back to some of those ways we were feeling before, to do something about it sooner as well. But I can appreciate it is scary to go back. Absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, next up. How can I enjoy my upcoming vacation without feeling guilty about returning to a burnout lifestyle?
I think just lead in and be present to your vacation, right? I know we're talking about like vacation is all burnout, but I'm not saying don't take vacations, right? And just try and be present and enjoy that vacation in that moment. And when feelings of guilt come up, it's just, okay, acknowledging like, okay, there's that feeling of guilt at returning back to this burnout lifestyle while I'm on vacation, like just name it, that's coming up for you. But then I would think, start thinking about like, are there things that you can change in that burnout lifestyle for yourself? Even if it's small changes, like small changes over time make a big difference. And so starting to think about that, but watch that guilt, right? Guilt isn't helpful. Just name it. Notice, okay, there's those feelings about guilt. There's those thoughts that I have about returning to work. Thank you, brain, for reminding me about that. Right? And then bring yourself back present to enjoy your vacation, right? Notice where you are, what you're doing, what you're eating, who you're around, and try and be present in that moment.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for all these questions. These are really amazing. We have another anonymous one here. For a really long-term burnout, 5+ years, are the strategies the same, or does it require a different approach if it's been long-term?
I think the strategies are very similar. It's just recognizing that it's going to take a really long time to come out of that burnout. Just like it's, 5+ years of experiencing it, it's going to take a long time to feel more like your authentic self and feel like you're managing. But it's going to be a lot of the strategies, and it's going to be a lot of those steps. It's just going to take time to do that.
Thank you. Okay, this is a really great one, actually. How do you support a loved one going through burnout?
That's a really great question, right? I wonder about how can you show up for that person, right? When we talked about like the different types of rest, makes me think about that, the different types of rest. And I talked a lot about like connection and the importance of like connection and how we co-regulate with other people. So I would encourage you to think about like the type of support, like maybe emotionally, just socially, physically, like what kind of support can you give to that person to help them feel connection, or maybe to help them to co-regulate. For some people, it may even be asking them like, what do you need, right? Just asking them like, I noticed that, saying, I noticed that things have been really hard, or I noticed that you've been carrying a lot of stress, like what can I do to help, right? How can I show up for you? But I think the intention of showing up and just being a person to hear them out without judgment from what they're experiencing, to allow them to be vulnerable without judgment, give them some compassion, can be really helpful as well.
Thank you. Okay, I see that we have two more. So I'm going to ask these two and then we can wrap things up for today. But again, if anyone does have any specific questions for Jessica or wants to find out more, Danielle did pop her link to her profile into the chat. Okay, one more's popped through. So I'm going to do these three and then we'll call it at those. So let's go through these quick fire. What if you are doing these things? So this one came through actually whilst you were talking about the 7 different types, and you're still burnt out.
Yeah, I think like we talked about is maybe it's connecting with your therapist and looking a little bit deeper about like what's getting in the way. That there may be some other pieces beyond just making like tangible changes in our lives, and so it's maybe looking at what's getting in the way, or there's other things that maybe you haven't thought of that can be helpful to you.
Thank you. Okay, so this is also an anonymous one, but it says, my burnout seems to cause a real breakdown in my communication, compounding the effects, also making it harder for me to realize I'm in that state. The worse it gets, the more mute and withdrawn I get until essentially something gives. I feel better after the snap, but then the cycle continues. Do you have any advice for breaking the cycle in the short term?
That's a really great question. It's a complicated question, right? In terms, it causes that breakdown in communication. I think a big part is that you're recognizing that happens. You have to recognize the pattern before you can do anything to change it. A big part is going to be noticing for you, like mentioned about naming it. I really like this phrase, like name it to tame it, is to notice like what is happening for you in that moment. So really becoming more aware of your feelings that are coming up. And when you're starting to withdraw, right, and being able to name, okay, this is what's happening for me right now. That's the only way you're going to be able to start to break that cycle, is you have to actually start to name it and noticing when that's happening, and maybe being able to like push yourself a little bit. I think, there's a lot of layers within that question that kind of need to be helped like dig through a little bit more to come up with kind of what would be best for you. But really starting with like noticing when that's happening. Okay, I'm withdrawing. Like this is feeling overwhelming for me.
For sure. Thank you. Okay, final question. Am I burnt out, or do I just not like what I'm studying anymore? How can I tell the difference because I'm so tired?
Yeah, that's hard, right? Because it can be just not a good match, right? For the thing that you're doing, you're not getting like fulfillment, or you're not feeling good about the things that you're doing. And I think just really evaluating like in what ways is it impacting you, right? Like, are you feeling that like withdrawal or that cynicism about the program that you're in? Are you feeling detached from the work that you're doing, right? And maybe just doing like some self-evaluation about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and is it a good fit for you? But I think also like when we're studying and we're in school, like it's hard, right? It's exhausting. And I think that's, sometimes shows up a lot in school when we're studying, is that we feel exhausted because it's so much to do it.
For sure. Thank you so much. And thank you again to everybody who submitted a question in our Q&A box. That was really great. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah. I wanted to just make a notice to like one of the comments I saw in the chat from Suzanne about returning to work can also involve others through a formal like return to work. Absolutely, right? A lot of people have done that and kind of done a gradual return to work to kind of get themselves back into it. So I think that is also a great plan. Also for some people when they're experiencing burnout, sometimes it is taking a leave of absence from work. Like, so even before like the return to work, right? Like taking that leave to just like get rest and then make changes, right? To have the space to be able to reflect on like, hey, what is it that I need to do? So for some people, it is evaluating the type of work that they do or what they're studying, right? From that leave is seeing, is this really aligning with what I want for myself? It's just kind of giving the space to be able to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, Jess. So we'll wrap things up now. So to everyone who joined us today and gave us questions and, just sat here to listen in, thank you so much for being part of the community. You mean the world to us. And special thanks to Jess for sharing everything we probably all really needed to hear. Again, today, you all will be getting a follow-up email with some additional resources right from Jessica that she still uses with clients today. The recording and the slide deck, just in case you ever want to revert back or share any of this. So you can expect that coming in your inbox by tomorrow at some point. And thank you again all for being here. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we hope that if you are in a state of stress or burnout, that these tips were really helpful and you can grab some strategies and some love from the community here to recover. So thank you. Have a great rest
Thank
of
you,
the day,
everyone.
everyone.